What do we mean when we say listening skills?
Yeah, so listening skills are crucial, especially when we talk about being in a distributed environment. Listening skills are at a premium. And when we talk about listening skills, what we're really looking to do is listen to understand, right? To understand what the other person is saying as much as we can. And there's so much involved when we talk about communication and listening, right? Because 50% of our communication is traditionally through body language. Well, if you're on a phone or you're virtual, you're missing part of that. 43% of communication is based on the voice, right? Inflection in the voice, how things are said. And then 7% are the actual words that we use. So that's why documentation is so ineffective at communication, communicating what it is that we're looking to get across to people. So, and when we talk about being on the phone, right, now if we're losing all of that body language, now it puts a premium on listening. So listening becomes, 90% or thereabouts of the communication, right? So to me, listening is crucial. And so the key things for effective listening is, number one, being focused, block out other things, really be laser targeted on your person, the content, what it is that you want to say, right? What's being communicated to you. So focus is like the number one thing, right? Really blocking out the other distractions like emails and texts and things like that. And then the other thing that's really important is establishing rapport with a person. What's that mean? Well, it means that you're communicating to them in a way, and you're responding to them in a way that resonates with them. So I think about rapport as an extension of modalities, communication modalities. So there's auditory, visual, and kinesthetic modalities, right? And when I work with clients, either individuals or groups, I am constantly flipping my modality to meet the modality of the person that I'm speaking with. And then some other things are around, reflecting back. And that's a basic coaching skill. Hey, this is what I'm hearing. Do I have that right? All right. Am I, listening, seeking to understand the message and what it is you're saying? And then making sure that we're listening for the whole message. And that's where we get into the levels of listening that we talked about before.
Thank you for that quick intro. But I think we need
not so quick intro.
I think we need to take a step back. And what I heard was that you're saying that listening is part of communication. Though I thought listening was just me talking and everybody else receiving whatever they want to, right?
But absorbing your wisdom, your words of wisdom. Yes.
So are you saying that listening is part of the communication, not just talking, but listening?
Also? Absolutely. I've had situations where I've solved the wrong problem. And I'm sure we've all been, guilty of this to one degree or another, right? But I've solved the wrong problem because it was the problem that I interpreted or that I thought I heard. And without checking in to say, yes, that is the problem, I'm solving something that doesn't do the client any good at all. So yes, like the listening aspect of it is key, and using the right techniques, the right level of listening is critical in order to make the connection and build the rapport.
Okay, great. So we cleared that listening is part of the communication, and we are always communicating as coaches, right? So let's talk about why should I, as a coach, or anybody for that matter, why should I worry about my listening skills? Why is it important?
Yeah, great question. So it's important because we want the client to advance their agenda, right? So we are always, as the backdrop, to all of the communication. It's the client's agenda. What's their vision? What's their big A, right? What's their big A agenda? Where do they want to go? So that's critical in all of this, is to understand that and have that as the backdrop. And then for me, it's making sure that we're in the right level of listening. Coactive coaching world, there are 3 levels, they call it the 3 levels of listening. And the first level is really focused on me. It's internal focus. What about what you're saying impacts me? And this is an effective and the correct technique when you're doing something like you're ordering in a restaurant and the waiter comes up and says, hey, here's our specials. Well, I'm listening, right? I have to be listening and focused on me, because are any of those specials things that interest me? And they're not on the menu. So, right, am I interested in those? So level 1 interesting is really around, hey, how does this impact me? What are my thoughts? What are my judgments? What are my feelings? What are my opinions in relation to what's being communicated? And this is where, from a coaching standpoint, it's not very effective, right? Because a lot of times people in level 1 are focused on responding to somebody else, right? I'm listening, or maybe I'm pretending to listen, and I'm actually rehearsing what it is that I want to say after you're done, right? So I'm not even really connected in the conversation. I've got another thought and I want to get my point across, and I'm doing it. I'm rehearsing it in my head, so that as soon as you're done and I find a break, I'm going to jump in and this is what I'm going to say, right? Or hearing what I think should be said, what I think you should be saying, not necessarily what you actually are saying. Or feeling defensive, like all of a sudden I feel like I'm attacked, right? And I think this is a big thing in the political world today, right? Where it's like, oh, we're attacking each other. We're not having conversations, right? We're throwing barbs at each other. And the same thing is true listening to disagree, right? It's like, oh, I'm listening to make you wrong for some reason, as opposed to listening to find common ground. So those level 1 listening is not effective for coaching. It's appropriate at times outside of coaching, but once we get into coaching, that's not one of the levels that we really want to be focused on.
Great. So we're saying that it is important for us to practice these listening skills, right? And you mentioned that there are different levels of listening, and we talked briefly about level 1. But if we can go into a little bit more detail as to what are those, how many levels, number 1, and number 2, what are those levels, and what are the differences? If you can clarify that would be awesome.
So level 1 is really focusing, it's internal focus. So what of what you're saying, how does that impact me, right? So it's all about me and how I feel, my judgments, my thoughts. Level 2 is focusing on you and what you're saying, right? It's more listening to the words, listening to your expressions, to some degree, the emotions that are behind it, so that there's this, I'm really seeking to understand more. When we talk about level 3, we're really talking about, as a coach, I'm listening with all my senses. So I'm listening basically just as I was at level 2, and I'm adding in, hey, what are the emotions that are coming across? What are the expressions that you're using? What's the energy that you have behind what you're saying? What's being said, and just as importantly, what aren't you saying, right? So really getting deeper in with regards to what it is that you're looking to communicate. And level 3 is where there's more intuition that comes in, right? So I often refer to it as my spidey senses will be tingling, right? So I'm going to follow my intuition more, because level 3 opens that up more, because I'm listening more holistically.
Great. When I'm coaching and mentoring folks, I tell them that that's the first thing you need to practice, as to be here now, as they call it, stay in this moment. Because if you can do that, then you are not even at level one, kind of. Right. So great. So these are different levels that we can practice listening. Obviously, as agile coaches, we need to be deeper into this listening, right? So if somebody wants to practice this listening and improve, more importantly, improve the listening skills, what can he or she do?
Like you had mentioned before, meditation is certainly a key aspect to get yourself centered, understand where you are, where I am. And so I'll talk about me, right? Where I am as a coach, I need to know where I am emotionally, right? So we talk about emotional intelligence. I need to understand where I'm at first, because that's going to impact how I respond and what I might say and things like that. So really getting myself prepped for the conversation is key. Clearing my mind, meditation, right? Making sure that I understand where I'm at. Oftentimes, if I'm starting a coaching call with somebody, I start out with clearing. Hey, what's on your mind right now that's going to distract you from our conversation right here, right now? What's going to prevent you or me from being present in the moment? And so that's, to me, that clearing is really important to set the stage so that we can then have that coaching conversation. And then I think from there, it's really practicing and noticing where I am as a coach. Where am I listening? What level am I at? It's very draining to be, for me personally, it's very draining to be at level 3 all the time. So I toggle between levels 2 and 3, I find in most of my coaching conversations. And level 2 is really what we would commonly refer to as active listening, right? I'm reflecting back, I'm using empathy, I'm, in the conversation, I'm listening, I'm pulling threads that I think are important, that that I'm feeling are important. And then I'll use my intuition. The spidey senses will kick in, and then I might pull on another thread over here, right? And understand how the conversation is going. And again, tying it all back, I got to reiterate this, tying it all back to the client's agenda, the big A agenda, like what they want to accomplish, as well as the agenda that they have for this particular conversation. It's crucial that we're always keeping that front and center, and that we're serving the client by having that be what we're focused on, how we want to move forward, and where we think the conversation is going to go in service of the client.
I say this, as coaches, conversation is our biggest tool. And, when we are having this conversation, obviously we are practicing the listening skills. But again, the other saying I often use is, as coaches, you have to make it about them. It's not about you, but about them, about your client, right? So you are referring to that big A agenda. So I'm listening. I'm part of that conversation, not because I want to drive my agenda, but I have to really listen to what the client is saying and not saying, and drive their agenda, right? So you can do that only when you are in that moment, listening in, and as you said, pulling different threads based on what you are hearing. So,
and I'll just pile on. So you're 100% right. Totally agree. And coaches need to be courageous from the aspect of saying, pushing back and saying, okay, this topic, or where we're going with this topic, doesn't seem to be serving your agenda, doesn't seem to be serving your vision of yourself, right? Help me to understand, and this is how I usually frame it up, right? Help me to understand how this is aligned, how this is furthering where you want to go as a human, right? To tap into your potential. And so I think that's, a key skill that coaches need is to call your client out as an act of love, right? As an act of supporting them and helping them to move forward. it's absolutely about, hey, this doesn't align. I don't see it. Help me to see it, right? Because I'm not getting it.
Are there any specific tools or techniques that I can use if I want to practice this listening, number one, and more importantly, improve my listening skills?
Clearly, that any of the coaching models that are out there are going to have information about listening in there or in them. So those would be great resources. The one thing that I have done, and I did this a lot when I was in my coaching certification program, was I would actually list out, I would have like a sticky on my phone or computer or whatever, and that would say, level 1, level 2, level 3. And I used that as a structure, as a tickler or a reminder, as to keep in mind, what level am I at? And my goal is to be in level 3 as much as possible, right, in service of the client. And so it really served me to keep it front and center for myself. Like, what is it that I'm experiencing? I would say another technique is to actually just ask for feedback. When I did some of my communications courses in the past, part of what I include in there, or what I was exposed to, was how did this session go, right? So I'm coaching somebody and I'm actually asking for feedback in the moment. Again, key thing: inspect and adapt. What questions landed for you? What questions didn't? How was this session for you, right? Because you're looking to improve, and especially if it's a client that you've built rapport with, and you're on the same page, and they understand that you're on a journey too. I think that that's critical in this, to get that feedback, because it'll help you to work with that particular client and potentially other clients as you move forward. So I think asking for that feedback is a crucial thing. And then I think some of the techniques that we had talked about in our prior call, where we talked about reflecting, mirroring, powerful questions, all of those are in play when you're talking about listening, because it's kind of the back and forth, right? If you think about a conversation as a tennis game or a ping pong game, right, or a badminton game, and it's going back and forth, right? You have to participate in this, right? So otherwise, it's just listening, and it may not further the client's agenda. And so, key thing there is, using some of those tools as part of that conversation in order to further the communication. Another key one that I've used time and time again is perspectives, right? Helping the person to see, hey, they're communicating to me and I'm listening, and I'm like, okay, so that might be one perspective, right? That's your current perspective. Let's label that perspective. And then let's approach this from 180 degrees. So if you spun around, and sometimes I'll actually have the client spin around, right? Physically change their perspective. So then they can understand, okay, so now I'm looking at it from this other angle, and what's that like for you, right? And what do we label this, and what's right? And so using perspectives, I think, is a really cool tool that people can pick up, and then they can use that in their own lives, right? Without a coach, so to speak, to help them to understand, hey, yeah, this is just one way to look at it. How do I look at it differently to make it more powerful for me, to make it resonate for me, to see the good in this potentially, bad situation, if you will.
I want to bring up a couple of things that I have done in the past, and I think it aligns with what you are talking about. And this was suggested to me by one of my mentor when I was on this journey earlier, and that was joining or signing up for an improv class, and that has made tremendous impact on it. On me, definitely, as a person, as a coach, right? And as you were saying, conversation it cannot happen one way, right? It's a two-way conversation. And as a coach, my intention is to keep that conversation going as long as it can, right? Because the more it goes, the more we hear from the client. So this improv gives you those techniques as to how do you keep that conversation going. And not because I just want to fill up an hour, but I'm actually listening to what the conversation, what the client is saying, and then feeding on it and bringing in another thread, as you were saying, asking relevant questions so that we can explore maybe another channel, another angle, as you were saying. The other aspect of communication, and earlier you said that a lot of the communication happens non-verbal. So just being aware of that kind of helped me. I started paying more attention to the body language, to the non-verbal cues, and that is one of the reasons why, in fact, I have in all my online training, it's a mandatory requirement that they turn on the camera, because without that I cannot see your face and expressions, the frustration, excitement. So all that body language, all that non-verbal communication that happens, that is lost if I can't see you. So especially in remote setup, that is even more important because we are not in the room, so I cannot see you. So without the video, you might as well not attend that session, kind of.
Yeah, and I love that, the improv. That's really gotten a lot of traction, I'll say, in the Agile coaching community, because it does help people to prepare for dancing in the moment, as I like to say, of a coaching engagement, right, or a coaching session. So I definitely agree with that. I think that's very powerful. I think the other thing that I wanted to touch on here is around the language that's being used, and I briefly hit on this with modalities. I think there's another aspect to this. It's something that I've gotten some training on this, and it's called powerless words, right? And they're words that they really depict intent. So if I said something to the effect of, well, I might kind of, sort of try to take an improv class, how committed am I, right? Kind of, sort of, might, right? Those are powerless words, right? There's no commitment behind it. And so I actually have a blog article that I wrote on this. It's probably like the #1 blog that I've ever written, because it's all around that communication and how, as a coach, hold people accountable for those things, right? So if one of my clients says to me, well, I might try an improv class, and even if they say it with a lot of enthusiasm, I might try an improv class, I'm like, okay, but what are you really saying there, right? Because again, I'm going to pull on that thread from an intuition standpoint and say, okay, let's explore that, right? You might try an improv class. What's that mean? What does that look like, right? And really have them either commit or don't. And I'm not attached to it either way as the coach. Commit or don't. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see this wishy-washiness that around trying and might and possibly or whatever, right? I will do this, or I am choosing not to do this, which is completely appropriate. But let's bring out that wishy-washiness when we're talking to people, because again, it doesn't serve the client, right? The client's not really committed to it. I'd rather the client commit to something that's meaningful for them, that they're actually going to do, as opposed to, giving me this softball, oh, yes, maybe I'll do it, right?
In line with that, I want to bring up another concept that I've been hearing and I've been practicing as well. There's this, they call it growth mindset and fixed mindset, right? So again, if you are a fixed mindset, you are more likely to use those powerless words. If you're a growth mindset, you are more towards those powerful words. So definitely, again, like just knowing those concepts will help you. And then you can go deeper into it, obviously. But just the awareness will make a big difference as well.
I love that. I love that you brought that up. You are spot on. And that is very powerful, right? That association between growth mindset, because that's what we're after from an agile coaching standpoint. And those powerless words are using powerful words. So that's awesome. Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome, great. So let's say I have been practicing these different tools that we talked about, different techniques. How do I know I'm getting better at listening?
I come back to the feedback cycle, right? And I think that's like your number one metric.
I think the first feedback you can get from your spouse, and you'll know whether you're listening or not.
Yes, that is very true. That is excellent, and I've said it before, right? I use coaching skills everywhere in my life, right? And it's just something that comes through exercising those muscles. It becomes habitual. So I think that's the first place to look. And I think, in my experience, clients really want to offer feedback on the sessions. So I think that's one thing. Another thing that you might be able to do, and this is I'm going back to techniques. Get a coaching cohort together on your own, right? If you're in a company and you have a couple of agile coaches, again, we talked about the coaching skill is way different than the mentoring and facilitation and training aspects. So really exercising as a community, break up into triads, have little coaching sessions. Everybody gets a turn. Everybody provides feedback to everybody else around the coaching skills that they're seeing, right? And it gives you an opportunity as either a community practice or a center of excellence, whatever, to really do that exercise and get that feedback in a safe environment where everybody is supporting everybody else. So I think getting that feedback is one, and then really being conscientious around how many times are my spidey senses tingling? How and in combination with that, how often are my spidey senses tingling and there's something there, right? Sometimes it's a false alarm, especially when I started out early. Lots of false alarms, right? Oh, no, there's nothing there. That's okay, right? I'm learning, they're learning, right? We're just exploring. And I'm not really married to the impact that particular technique has, right? So to me, I would be, just not necessarily tick marking, but just being aware. How often is your intuition in play? How often are you using your intuition? And out of those, 10 times that you were, intuitive, how many of them resonated and how many of them were off base? Just as a frame of reference, right? To see how you're continuing to improve, right? So I think those are good. And then I think those are really the big ones that I can think of. What do you think?
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. It could be as simple as asking the client for the feedback. In fact, that will make them feel great, because hey, they'll think, hey, this guy really is interested in what I am or what I feel and what I have to say, right? So it could be as simple as asking feedback from your team or feedback from your peers, right? As you said, work with a couple of other coaches, make up triads. With that said, I say, when you ask for feedback, be ready to get some negative feedback also. Everything won't be positive. And if they have to say something negative about your approach or your method or whatever you want to call it, if you get that bad feedback, negative feedback, don't be upset. That is in fact highlighting the opportunities for you to grow in those areas, right? So take it on your chin, take it positively, that okay, thank you for this great feedback. let me work on those areas, right? If you do that, again, the client will feel great that, hey, this guy is really listening, and I'm helping him also, him or her also to grow, right? So it's a two-way channel, right? They are getting a lot of value from you, obviously, as an agile coach. But I look at it as an opportunity for me also to learn something new and grow.
I want to just pile on. I look at feedback as a gift, right? So if somebody gives me constructive feedback and they say, and I ask for feedback a lot. If I get some constructive feedback, I am super appreciative, right? I am just like, oh, this is amazing. Thank you so much, right? Because it is a gift. And then I'm at choice. This is the beauty of it, is that then I'm at choice. I can decide, yes, that's something that I want to improve.
Yep.
Or I can decide that's not really where I want to go.
Yep.
Right. And so at least having that feedback, that gift of that feedback, gives you the opportunity to make that decision.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing I'll say is, if I hear the same thing repeatedly, it just escalates how urgently I need to work on that particular technique or that skill.
Yeah. Yeah. And then feeding on to that, I look at it as the feedback is kind of a validation also for you. And if you're getting certain kind of feedback and that's where you want to be, it's kind of validation that, hey, whatever you're doing must be good. You're on the right path, right track. But if the feedback is not in line with where you want to be, then it's giving you that, hey, you need to adjust your approach, your method, whatever you want to call it, right? So it's kind of a validation also as to, am I doing right? Am I, whatever I'm doing, is it taking me on the right path to where I want to be as a coach as well?